Hey guys, so today I got a video about pump foamers and how to use them so you actually get good foam out of it and also you get the maximum potential out of it. The benefit of foam is that you're gonna have a product that sits on the surface longer without drying up. Foam has a lot of air and bubbles, and because of that, the time it takes to dry on a surface is a lot longer, which gives you more time to work the chemical into the surface. So for example, like I've done in many of my videos, like cleaned wheels, and I love the foamer for it because the foam clings to the surface, it's not gonna dry, and you usually wanna let this stuff sit for a while because cleaning a wheel does take a decent amount of time. So having the foamer really helps with that. And there's a ton of different applications for this using foam that you'll find could be useful for you. I personally prefer it for wheels, if I'm doing floor mats and stuff, and then also carpet cleaner could be useful, but I personally don't use it as with carpet cleaner at the moment. So there's a lot of applications of using a pump foamer, so you wanna make sure that you're using it correctly. So there's a lot to this model, at least. This is an IK Foam Pro 2 Plus, and it's a solid foam cannon. You can change the way the fan goes. You just have to unscrew this top here, and then you can angle it differently. So I can angle it so it's a horizontal fan, or I could angle it so it's a vertical fan. It's pretty straightforward how that works. And then it's got the pressure release, which I went over in another video, and then also a air intake, so you can refill it with air super quickly instead of having to pump it up like a bazillion times. I personally just hand pump it every time. I usually don't have my compressor set up 24/7 to just pop it in with a bolt chuck. I prefer just pumping it, and it works great. It's got the lock as well, which is nice. It's not gonna fall, you know, like I said in the other video, it's not gonna fall too easily, so it's a good foamer. Let's get into the exact technical details of it and how to set up your pump foamer so you're using it properly and you're getting the maximum value out of it. So I've just taken off the head of the pump foamer, and you can see it's got a little bit of chemical in there, and it's also got this tube and a tube and then another tube. So this tube is the intake for the chemical, so it'll intake the chemical, bring it into the chamber, and the chamber is what causes it to foam up. You can actually see there's a lot, like a decent amount of little air bubbles in there, and that's where the chemical kind of mixes with the air to create foam. This is what it looks like when you pump it without the container. So you can see the plunger going down, and it pushes the chemical up into these little tubes on the side that allows it to mix with the air, and then it gets shot out from the front with that spread of air to chemical, and it allows it to foam. Immediately you might be thinking oh, okay, I could just throw any chemical in here and get foam out of it, and that's not really how it works. The way the chemical actually starts to foam is it needs a surfactant in it to actually foam up. You'll notice that when you're pouring a chemical into a container, if it foams out of the container, then it most likely has a surfactant. And then it also needs to be a certain viscosity. So with some chemicals, they're gonna be too thick for it to foam properly, and it won't shoot out of the cannon well. And then some of them are gonna be too light and just kind of be watery, so then they won't really do anything. You have to make sure you have the right viscosity for your chemical, so that you get a decent amount of foam out of it rather than just not getting the benefits of the foam. So for thickening it up, I don't think you can really do that with a chemical, so at least that I'm aware of. So usually you'll have something that's too thick, and then you need to kind of loosen it up. What I have in here is Brake Buster, and I use it 1-to-1 in the foam cannon. It works great. You can dilute it like crazy though, and it'll work. It'll probably foam even better. Honestly, in my videos, you see it foams really good with 1-to-1. I would use it fully, 100% chemical, but it just doesn't come out of the cannon well at all. I would demonstrate that, but don't really have a good way to do it. It just kind of becomes kind of sputtery, and it doesn't fan, and it's just no good. It doesn't really suit the purpose of a pump foamer. It just kind of spews the chemical out in globs. And also, if the chemical is too viscous, it's going to not spray for that long, because you're gonna get streams of big globs of chemicals and then also a stream of air coming out. So the lifetime of your spray is going to be extremely reduced. Now that I do a 1-to-1 mixture, I can spray for maybe a solid 10 seconds, which is honestly a little short, but it's better than 4.3255 seconds or whatever I was getting before and getting zero coverage. I've tried to find videos that would explain this more, but no one was really pointing it out. This does not spray that long. You'll maybe be able to get one wheel with this fully pressurized. You might think okay, well, my chemical's ready to use, but it's too viscous, so does that affect how it performs? It probably reduces the potency of the chemical. So that's why when people say, use Brake Buster 4-to-1 in your foam pump foamer or something, I'm like, well, then it's barely gonna clean the wheel. I mean, sure, that might be good for a wheel that's not very dirty, but for my applications, I just wanna get the wheel clean. Like, that's it. I don't care how dirty it is beforehand, I just want it to be clean after. And so 1-to-4 wasn't really doing what I wanted it to do. So the closest I could get was 1-to-1, and maybe I could go 3 parts of the chemical to 1 part water, but I don't really want to push it past 1-to-1 because it works really well right now. Maybe there'll be room for experimentation eventually, but right now, not so much. So when you're trying to find that dilution ratio, it's actually going to be a little bit difficult unless you do testing. So you're going to have to, maybe make like 10 ounces of like 4 different ratios and try to find one that really fits the amount of cleaning you're trying to get, and then also works well with the pump foamer itself. I found this thing works with APCs, it works with wheel cleaners, and it also works with carpet cleaners. I'm sure there's other chemicals it works with, but that's what I've had the most success with, and also from like a purpose perspective, it makes most sense for those kind of chemicals, because for a carpet cleaner, you want it to sit on the carpet instead of just soaking into the fibers and going away. And then for brake buster, you want it to sit on the wheel. And then for like an APC, you might want it to sit on the surface instead of just falling off before you get to agitate it. So whatever chemical you're going to put in the pump foamer, you want it to be able to sit on the surface. So that's gonna be your key in determining whether or not it's something you want in the pump foamer, first of all. The second is how much do you need to apply? With a little handheld pump foamer like this, you're gonna maybe get like 10 to 20 seconds of spray. It depends on how full your canister of chemical is and how pressurized it is. Right now, I just have this brake buster and it's full. I won't have to pump it very much to get it fully pressurized, but that means I won't have a very long spray time because the amount of pressured air to the chemical, that ratio is very low in of itself. Whereas if I had half of the chemical remaining, I'd get double that, so 20 inches of pressurized air, and that would allow me to spray for a longer time because I have more pressurized air versus how much chemical is in there. Usually I load the pump sprayer up to full in terms of the chemical capacity because that's what I want it for. I want to be able to use all the chemical in the container. And if that means I have to pump it a little more, I don't really care. So if you want to have consistency in your spraying, make sure you're trying to fill it up to the same amount every time as well. So another thing that's important about at least this model of foam cannon is it comes with 3 different tips. So right now I have a green one installed. There's also an orange and a gray, and they yield different types of foam. So the green is gonna get you a nice dry foam, which I've mentioned before. Orange is gonna be a wet foam, and then the gray will be like somewhere in between. Picture the different foams like this. The dry foam is going to be something that sticks to the surface for a very long time, but the amount of product you're getting on the surface is not gonna be that much because it's gonna be a lot more air. So think of like a whipped cream. It gets on the surface, it stays, but it's not gonna melt, really. So for a wet foam, it's gonna be more like, you're gonna have a mixture of that dry foam, but it's gonna also have some just straight chemicals in it. So it's going to help drag the foam down the surface that you're working on. If you want the product to take some of the dirt with it onto the ground or be a little more concentrated so that you can agitate it yourself, then that would be what the application of the orange tip would be for a wet foam. So wet foam does have its benefits. And then for the intermediate, it's just somewhere in between, being sitting on the surface and running off the surface. I'm not sure when you would want to use that. Maybe if you don't know if the orange or green is better for your application, but I would prefer to have something more in line with what I want to achieve with my pump foamer. I would prefer to use either the orange or green tips, and if there's an actual difference in the results, I honestly couldn't tell you guys, but I'd like to think there is because they gave it to me. That's gonna be more like a more nuanced thing, but it could help you clean better based on what kind of application you're trying to get out of it. So I definitely recommend kind of thinking about what makes the most sense for the chemical you're applying and using your brain and critical thinking skills to surmise the best solution. If you're having trouble with that, you can always ask me. We're a team, guys. We do this together. That's everything I know about pump foamers. They're very useful tools, but they do have a lot of nuance. You can experiment, have some fun with it, really go. It's free will, do whatever the hell you want. So guys, that's it for the foam pump stuff, and I hope you learned a little something today, and as always,